Here's for sourdough bread.
Hi. Okay, so sourdough bread, the basics. It's made from using wild yeast. It's called starter. So if you've ever made bread before with yeast from the grocery store, this is not that. Yeast from the grocery store is commercial. They create it. This is how bread has been made since the very beginning. It's easier for the gut to break down than commercial yeast, and it has lower gluten content, and it's also very tasty. A little bit of history. It's been around since the fall. The first reference I could find in the Bible was Genesis 3:19. This is King James. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken. For dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. So I looked up the Strong's definition, and it's, I'm going to try to say it right, lechim. I have not ever taken a class for Hebrew, so that just means bread or grain for making bread. So they're referencing making bread already immediately after the fall. The Lord speaking to Adam about the curse. So starter, as I mentioned before, this is your yeast. It's what makes your bread rise. It will make it bubble and poop up. It's made with water, flour, and wild yeast from the air. So there's two ways to make a starter. You can make one yourself, which is a lengthy process because it takes 3 to 4 weeks to get a good enough starter to make bread with, or you can get one from a friend. And I happen to have come with a massive jar of unfed starter, and I have enough for everybody who wants some. And we have jars so that you can feed it yourself and take it home with you, so you'll have your little starter baby. And you don't have to start one on your own because that's not fun. But if you want to know how to make one, you start with a 1-to-1 ratio of flour and water, and you have to feed it. This is only when you're making it, like as a brand new starter. You have to feed it every 12 hours, so twice a day, and it takes 2 to 4 weeks. I tried doing it before. I hit 24 days, and then I found someone who had one, and I was like, can I please have some of your starter? Because I'm just not doing this anymore. It's when you have a baby starter, it's harder to make bread with because it's not as consistent. It's like a baby. You want adult starter, which mine is. So that's nice. Okay, you have to feed it every day. I leave mine on the counter at room temperature, and it doesn't matter if it's 8 a.m. every day or noon or 9 p.m. at night, but ideally you feed it at the same time every day. Feed it once a day, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So I have a digital scale. This pairs with my Vitamix, but you can get digital scales for less than $10 on Amazon, like $8.95 or something like that. And with the digital scale, I weigh my jar. I could weigh an empty jar and zero it out and then see how much I have in here, or just pour it into the new jar. So put your empty jar on the scale and then hit 0 and then pour your starter in it, and however many grams you have, let's say it's 50 grams. Then I zero it out again, and then I add 50 grams of water. And I hit 0 again, and then I put 50 grams of flour. Well, first I stir, and then I put the flour in. So you now have 150 grams in here. It's important to use the scale and not to use a measuring cup, because flour, if you've ever baked anything, you're supposed to fluff up flour and then scoop it into your cup and then level it off. That's because it can get really compacted. And if your flour is compact, there's more there. And so you could be off by 75 or 100 grams if you try to measure it in a measuring cup. So we use a scale. It's also a whole lot faster. See, did I miss anything? Oh, we use a rubber band to mark the jar. I did not bring a rubber band because it's at home on the one I left at home. But this is a Sharpie marker. It comes off glass, so it's fine. But I use a Sharpie. So this is where this was this morning whenever I fed it. Well, I fed it at 2:30. Right now it's up here because it's rising, it's eating. So it's actually, my starter is almost tripled. It's ready to make bread with, which I will be doing in a little bit. Your starter will begin to eat, and the wild yeast mixture will begin to feed on the fresh flour you've added in the jar. As the yeasties eat the yummy flour, it releases gas in the form of bubbles, and it makes it rise in the jar. So like I showed you, it has risen. Your rubber band is the starting place. I put my rubber band, right here, but this time I drew on it with Sharpie. It's my rubber band's on my jar at home. Let's see. When it's doubled, mine closest to triples, then it's ready to use. So ideally, it'll get to its highest spot, and then after 20, 30, 40 minutes, you'll see it starting to fall. So right in that range is when you want to bake with it. Now, I maybe bake with my bread at that spot 5% of the time. When it gets to doubled, I know it's gonna go higher, but sometimes I make bread when it's just doubled. It's forgiving in that manner. So there's a range, but the perfect spot is when it has just started to fall. But you need to have been feeding your own in your kitchen with your humidity and your temperature in your kitchen to learn what your starter does as to how high it goes in your jar and when it starts to fall. And so some people will mark a time on it. I don't have it on here, but the time right here would say 2:30 p.m. And right now, are we close to 6:30? So it's been almost 4 hours for this starter. And since you'll be going home with my starter, this is about how long it will take to get to bread making time. So if you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and feed it, you can be ready to mix up bread at 10 a.m. It's 4 hours. Let's see. Okay, yeah, it takes hours. It's a long process. In the warm months, it can take 3 to 5 hours, or in the cooler months, it can take 7 to 9 hours for this to rise. So when it's really cold in my house, because we're keeping temperature, like the heat, we keep it at like 65 sometimes, you know. It is cold. It can take almost all day for the starter to get to the point where I'm ready to mix up bread with it. So it's gonna fluctuate, and nothing is set in stone when it comes to time with bread or with starter. It is like a child or a pet. We name our starter. Mine is called Millie. Because I mill my own flour. I was getting creative there. So I've had Millie for 4 years, almost 4 years now. And I got it from a friend who had been making it for years. So I don't know how old my starter is, but okay, fun fact, there's starters that have been around for like 150 years. Overseas in Europe, bakers, they have probably far larger jars than that of starter that they feed every day and make their bread off of. And the starter was like made originally with the wild yeast in the air that long ago. I think that's super cool. Mine's not that old. Let's see. Okay, I know it's kind of hard to see the jar. You can see my rubber band on here in the first picture. So immediately after I feed it, I kind of use my knife to scrape the inside of the jar so the gunk isn't sticking to it, and that way you can see through where the line is. And then I just put my rubber band right there at that spot. And so, let me look at, I can't see on here. There's a time, I can't see on this one either. There's a time lapse here. I think the last picture was 4 hours. I did it once every hour. So I fed, and it's 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. And then I stopped. It would have tripled, but I stopped taking pictures because I was like, yeah, I'm good. Okay. What goes up must come down, so your starter will fall. And it will fall almost back to your rubber band line, not quite. It'll still have a little bit of air in it, but the gases that the starter is, the bubbles, is carbon dioxide. So the yeast is eating the bread and it's releasing CO2. And then all those bubbles just make it come up. But then when the starter isn't hungry anymore, the bacteria, the yeast in it is no longer hungry, then most of the bubbles will pop and it will go back down. So we only feed it when it's hungry. And so consistent feeding, I do it every 24 hours. Also, never crank down on a lid. All these are loose. Can you see they're loose? Oh, this one's not loose. That's not good. You need a lid on it because fruit flies love sourdough starter. But if you crank it down, it will build up pressure. Like a carbonated drink, it's got CO2 in it, and Sol said she's done this before. She had it cranked down, and when I took it off, it was like pop. So, never crank down on the lid. Okay, let's see. We already went over 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, so you fed it. We had 50 grams of unfed starter, 50 grams of water, and 50 grams of flour. Math, we're at 150, okay? The next day, it's time to feed it again. We're not gonna keep all 150 in the jar, because then you'd have to add 150 water, and then 150 flour, and then you're at 450. And you're gonna be in the gallons by the end of the week. Like, we don't want that much starter. This is all I keep every day. So this is it. And so after sometimes not even that, 25 grams is really the minimum of unfed starter that I keep. But after it's fed, because this is unfed, I'm gonna feed it for y'all. After it's fed, it's about up here, and then it has to have room to triple. So yesterday, the bottom of my lid had goop all over it because it rose so high that it touched the bottom of the lid, and I was like, oops, should have got a bigger jar. But it didn't overflow. It could overflow. I've seen pictures of it bubbling out on the counter. This one didn't. So we pour some of it out. What we pour out, we put in a container if you want. You can put it in the trash, you can put it down the sink. But if you want to keep it, we call it sourdough starter discard. And the discard is what made the bread over. Well, the bread, was that just a regular sourdough recipe, or was that with discard?
Discard.
So the bread, the cake, and the cinnamon rolls were all made with discard. I am not going to focus on anything discard because there's so many recipes online. I have yet to come across one that was bad. They were all delicious. All the food, so good. But keep it, you put it in the fridge. Some websites say only keep for 3 weeks. I have never poured mine out. I keep adding to it and pulling from it and adding to it and pulling from it. I have not had a single problem. It smells perfect. It's been in the fridge. There's no mold or anything, so I use it. Make crackers, bread, all sorts of fun stuff. I have a cinnamon roll recipe that is to die for. I haven't tried your cinnamon rolls, so yours is super yummy too. Okay. Back to the important stuff. If you're not making bread for a while, the starter can be stored in the fridge and you can feed it one time a week. Because it gets tedious every day to feed it constantly. And you're like, I'm not making bread, or I'm going on vacation. What am I going to do with Millie? You know, I was trying to come up with a quick name, but I couldn't, so I just went with my own name. So Millie doesn't want to live on the counter when you're not there because she will die. And that would be very sad. I put it in the top shelf of the fridge and like put a note in my calendar so I remember to pull it out and feed it 7 days later. But I feed it, put it directly in the fridge, and so what the refrigerator does is it almost stops the bacteria from eating. It slows it down way, way a lot. So it eats very, very slowly. Even after a week, I'll pull it out and put it on the counter and wait 8 to 10 hours, and it finishes eating before I feed it. If you feed your starter before it's hungry, it doesn't like that. It will become weaker. You won't be able to tell after one feeding. But if you consistently feed it and it's not hungry yet, like it's not come back down to the rubber band line, hasn't quite been 24 hours, you're like, oh, it's been 20 hours, that's cool. That's not a big deal. But if it's only been 10, you don't want to feed it again because it'll get weaker. You won't have as much spring whenever you bake the bread. So it's important to stay on the schedule. It loves a schedule. Remember, this is a toddler, okay? You want to feed it on time and stick to a schedule, and that's what makes it happy. But you can put it in the fridge, unlike a toddler. Don't put your toddler in the fridge. Okay, let's see. Starter is actually a lot more resilient than you think. So it's forgiving. A friend of mine in Virginia had hers on the counter, and she forgot to feed it for 3 days. Well, 3 Jesus days. So she fed it on the 3rd day. And it was fine. She had to wait 3 or 4 days of feeding it, and then she was like, it bounced back. It was okay. So it's not an end-all be-all. Sourdough could be kind of fickle, but it's not so bad. Some people are terrified and they're like, I had this horrible experience, or someone told me all this awful stuff and now I'm super scared to do this. Don't be scared, okay? I've made many flops of bread, as you will see today, and it's okay, they still taste amazing. Okay, flour. This is one of my favorite parts. So there's a ton of options. I can actually give y'all or text you a thing for my PowerPoint if you want this too, so you taking pictures, or you can have this if you want. I've got all this stuff written down on here. So we're recording this for YouTube, and under it in the comments I will put a link to the PowerPoint. So you can rewatch this video, and you can also read through these and see the words better. Yeah, we can't turn all the lights off, so anyway. Flour. I know there's a lot. It can be hard to choose. Some people don't even think about flour. You should not make sourdough bread with commodity flour. So if it's Walmart brand or something like that, if it's bleached, just don't. It's not going to turn out well. I mean, you can try. It may be okay. But there's so much stuff added that the grain has been heavily sprayed with pesticides and all the stuff. So if you buy an organic flour, that is one of the best ways that you can go. So just spring for the organic. Trust me. I buy King Arthur flour, but it's expensive. You know, it's like $10 for 5 pounds of flour. That is what I have. That is what I have in here is King Arthur flour. King Arthur has bread flour and they have all-purpose. I ran out of bread flour 2 days ago, so all this was made with all-purpose flour, and that's what's in here. So I haven't been back to the store, and I don't notice much difference. It has to do with the protein content. So there's 13 grams of protein in the bread flour, and there's only 8 or 9, I think, in the all-purpose flour. Per serving, per whatever it is, I don't know. But anyway, the higher the protein content, the better the gluten formation of the bread. And the gluten is what gives it the wonderful rise that we're looking for with bread. Let's see. The best option, the absolute best option, is to buy wheat berries and mill your own flour, which I have. These are wheat berries. If you want to, these, I'm going to throw them away, okay? So if you want to look at them, play with them, touch them, what just got to do. I like touching things. I'm a very tactile person. And I was like, I have to bring wheat berries to play with, okay? But I brought with me my wheat berries, which I have in here. Hold on. There's a good seal, but it keeps the bugs out. Oh. I gotta do it on the floor. There we go. So in here, I have a food safe bag because food safe buckets are really expensive. And I was like, I'm not doing that. But the bag's only $1 a piece. And I have I have a scoop and I have all of my wheat berries. So, let me see. What is a wheat berry? I'm going to talk about the wheat berries and then I'm going to show you how to grind the flour whenever we get to that part of making bread. I use a Vitamix. It's going to be loud, but that's okay. Let's see right here. Wheat berries are the seed-bearing fruit of the wheat grass that comes from thrashing wheat. So if you've seen fun old films and they're holding grains of wheat and they're going like this on the ground, okay? Literally what comes out of that are these. When stored away from rodents and moisture, the berries will last forever. It really is forever. Forever and ever and ever. If you don't get spiders or rats or anything like that and they stay dry, you're good forever. So it's good to buy big bags. Like I buy 50-pound bags, and it's okay if it takes 3 years to go through the flour. It's totally fine. Let's see. They're highly nutritious. Bread used to be the primary source of food, and this is why. Wheat berries provide 40 of the 44 essential nutrients vital to human life. There are 4 that are missing are vitamin A, B12, C, and iodine. So when in the Old Testament, you know, people are like, we're eating bread, and they're eating bread, and they're eating bread. We can't do that now, you know, we just get really fat. But the bread that they're eating is actually almost their entire nutrition makeup. They can eat bread and then eat just a few other small foods, and they have everything that they need. But as soon as, okay, so here's the catch. As soon as you crush a wheat berry, as soon as you start to grind it, it's on a time clock. And you have 24 hours before it's gone bad. Every hour that passes, the nutrient content starts dropping by percentages. I don't have those memorized, but up to 45% in the first 24 hours. At 48 hours, it's legitimately rancid. You cannot do anything with it. But if you grind it, and as soon as it gets wet with your bread, the going bad part of it stops. Like, as soon as you've mixed up bread, that ceases to happen. But when it just stays as milled flour on the counter, you got a problem. So why can't we find this in the store? That's why. It has to be freshly ground. The store sells flour and it lasts years because of this. They only use the endosperm of the wheat berry. So here's a diagram of the wheat berry. I know that's hard to see. But there's 3 things labeled here. The endosperm is on the top, and it's labeling the large portion in the middle, and then there's the bran layer, and then the germ layer. So the bran is 15% of the kernel, and it has vitamins that make up what we call the vitamin B complex. It's all B's. The endosperm is 83% of the kernel, and it has a couple of vitamins in it, but it's mostly starch, a little bit of protein. Starch, carbs. And the germ is 2.5% of the kernel, arguably one of the best parts of it. It has vitamin E, fatty acids, protein B6, riboflavin, and thiamine. All those vitamins are not in your flours at the grocery store. They fortify your flour at the grocery store, so they're basically putting vitamins into the flour. I'm not going to go on a long rabbit train about vitamins, but your body doesn't absorb all the vitamins that you take. Like, everyone's going to be different, but vitamins do not absorb the same way into your body that food does. So even if you see that, even if it's the same numbers, fortified and natural, it's not going to be recognized the same way by your body, if any of it's absorbed. Again, these charts are hard to see. After I'm done talking, nope, you can't see it on here either. Y'all can look at it on the link, which I can put on the two groups, and I can text you, neighborhood ladies, the link so that you can see these, or the PowerPoint, so you can see the charts. But here's a comparison. The fresh ground wheat berries and the flour sold in store. So first one is whole wheat, that's talking about the wheat berries. The middle column is enriched, and then, unenriched. And the right column is enriched. So let me see if I can see it down here. They're almost the same calories. There's less protein by 3 grams. The unenriched still has some nutrients in it, but not nearly as much. Some of them only have 20% of the nutrients of the whole wheat berry in it. So it's like right down here, this is only 25%. That last vitamin, whatever that says, because I can't read it. So, let's see, the flour at the store. So you're like, is this bad for me? No. In short, like, it's not bad for you. If you buy organic, unbleached flour, which organic should be, it is not bad for you, but you're mostly consuming empty calories. What you are benefiting from is all of the good probiotics that you get from sourdough. So it's good for your gut, but you're not getting any of these vitamins, except for what they enrich it with in the store. Let's see. But bread can be healthy, like legitimately healthy for you if you grind wheat berries. So I happen to have a Vitamix, but there's mills online that you can get for as little as $64. Oh no, that's for the wheat berries. I did see mills for $50 to $60, all the way up to hundreds of dollars, depending what mill you get. But on Amazon, you can buy a mill specifically for milling flour. I happen to already have a Vitamix, and that mills my flour, so I don't have to buy anything there. Okay, there's 4 types of wheat berries. So if you're shopping and you're like, what on earth? Like, I haven't heard of these before. I buy hard white wheat berries because they have the highest protein content. The red wheat berries are used for other types of pastries and stuff like that. White wheat is best for bread, and the hard white wheat has more protein than the soft white wheat. Now, I know people who use soft and hard together, and they throw in some barley and some rye, and they grind it all up and they make sourdough, and it's great. But for these purposes, I buy hard white wheat berries. And I used to shop at a Mennonite store in Virginia, but there are no Mennonites out here. Google was like, what are you talking about? I was getting results for the East Coast, and like, this is not gonna work. So once upon a time, I paid $32.50 for a 50-pound bag of wheat berries in 2021. And now my friend who's still out there, she goes, I'm paying $45 to $50 for that same bag now because of how much inflation has. So I felt a little bit better about having spent $64 plus tax. Then that's with the shipping though. So I was like, she's paying $45 to $50. I paid $64. That's not so bad, but it's 50 pounds. That's a lot of wheat berries. It will last you a long time. I have a bucket here and I have another one in my car. We'll get to this again at the end, but if you want to go home with wheat berries today, I brought baggies, I have my scale. It's $1.33 a pound. So it's $4 for 3 pounds. You can get some from me and just pay me and take it home and try it. If you like that, great. If you don't, you haven't invested in 50 pounds of wheat berries. And you're like, okay, crazy Kara, you grind your wheat berries. Totally fine. I have these links, again, whenever I send you the PowerPoint, you can click on them, but this is, as your standard, is where I ended up buying from. The one below it is $66 after shipping and tax. They were about the same price, but I bought from the first one. That is my bag, which doesn't live in the bag anymore. They live in these buckets, and I can just label the top. This is everything I just said. Let's see. Okay, the food trade bags are $1. Well, it's $12.99 for 12 bags on Amazon. So I have food grade bags. I would not put the wheat berries directly into the Lowe's or Home Depot bucket. I may call this a Home Depot bucket later because that's just how it comes out, but I like blue better than orange. So I went to Lowe's. That was the deciding factor. I would have driven the extra quarter of a mile to Home Depot, but I didn't because I wanted the blue buckets. Let's see. Willing meat berries. Milling wheat berries is fairly simple and it's really fast. So here's the prices of the machine, as I mentioned before. I sometimes will pour 2 cups of wheat berries in my blender. I'm not making that much bread tonight. I will use less than that, and it grinds pretty well. About 1.5 to 2 cups is going to be the best grind because there's enough to keep it moving. Otherwise, sometimes it kind of wants to stay still. Okay, so I'm going to weigh what I need and proceed as usual. So I'll just take my thingy and I put it on my scale and with the lid off, and I will hit 0, and then I start pouring stuff in there because now it's not weighing my blender, it's only weighing what I put in the blender. Let's see. Oh, yes. Okay. It's loud. It's very loud. I will yell in the house, cover your ears! And everyone's like, and y'all will have to cover your ears. We'll get to do this in a couple minutes. Well, I'll cover our ears. It is very loud. However, I mean, it's worth it. I didn't have to buy a mill machine. Those are also loud. It's not as loud as the Vitamix, but it's worth it to not buy something else. Okay, so making sourdough. No bread machines here. Okay, this isn't commercial yeast. It's actually very easy. There's very little to do. It just takes time. A cast iron Dutch oven, which is 3 quarts. This one I think is 3 quarts. I don't know, the bottom's scratched up. This is the one I use. If I'm making a double batch, I'll use my bigger one. I have a red one that's bigger, but this is the cast iron that I use. And you need warm water, a digital scale, which I already told you about. Optional, you can use a thermometer. Whenever you're making the bread, it is best to warm up the water, especially in the wintertime. In the summertime, half the time I don't warm it. But yeast likes warm environments. So when it's warm, it's going to start eating and getting really happy. When it's cold, like in the refrigerator, it slows down and gets sleepy. So if you put ice cold water in it, it's gonna get sleepy, which means it's gonna take that many more hours on the counter as it does its bulk ferment. We'll get to soon. So the thermometer is if you are like OCD and want to have it at the perfect temperature. I use this with my hands clean. If you have to pull your finger out of the water really fast, it's too hot. If you can't feel it, it's too cold. You're only at 98 degrees. If it feels cold, you're less than 98 degrees. So if you can put your finger in and it's pretty warm, but you don't have to yank it back out, you're somewhere between 105 and 115. Because once you hit about 115, it's too hot to leave your finger in there. This is how they did it since the beginning of time. They didn't have thermometers, okay? They probably also didn't use their finger, but I did. I use a fork to stir it up because when I'm mixing the water with the starter, it just loosens it up better than a spoon does. You can use a spoon, but I find that it sticks to the spoon and then I'm doing this thing, trying to get it off. The fork doesn't do that. And you need a silicone lid or cling wrap or something. These are the lids. Ooh, that's a lot of condensation. It's wet. That's normal. These are the lids I use. You know how to tie one of these. You can use cling wrap. Don't cover it with a tea towel because you want it to make somewhat of a seal because you want the condensation to stay in there, or as your bread is proofing in the bowl, it kind of gets a crusty top on it. So a tea towel, while it keeps the bugs out, it kind of gets dry. It won't happen because all the condensation stays in and it slowly drips back onto the bread and it's fine. Let's see, did I miss anything? Oh, parchment paper. I do not make bread without my parchment paper. I go to Costco and I buy all the parchment paper. I live by this stuff. We use parchment paper 3 or 4 times a day, okay? Don't use wax paper. Wax paper is not parchment paper. You will be calling the fire department if you use wax paper. It does catch on fire. Even if you don't have a gas oven, it will burn, and just don't go there. Parchment paper, no wax. I have a friend who did that. I felt it was very important to mention. Wax paper is not the same thing. She now knows this, and she knows the names of the fire department people who came and said hi. Okay, let's see. Baking bread. Okay, we're gonna start. The recipe I use is from axofsourdough.com. The recipe, I have listed it here. On Acts of Sourdough, she goes through the whole process, which I'm going to say out loud here. You may find more information that she said that I didn't. I'm pretty sure I'm covering everything, but if y'all want to go read that, you can. There's lots of recipes, and everyone I talk to is like, my recipe's amazing, and they're all different. I'm not knocking your recipe. If you have one and you love it, that's great. This is the one I use. I used to use a recipe that had olive oil in it. It was great bread, but I find better consistency with this one. Sometimes my bread would rise, and sometimes it would only rise a little bit. This makes 2 loaves of bread. It's easy to remember. I have it memorized. Like, I never look at a recipe for bread because it's so simple. So for 2 loaves, you make it all together and then you'd separate it. Today I'm gonna half this recipe whenever I make it up. But I was like 1,700, 118. Like, that's all I had to remember. So it's 1,000 grams of flour, 700 grams of water. It's important we measure in grams, okay? 700 grams of water is over 3 cups. It's somewhere around 1.33 cups or slightly over 1.33 cups to make a half batch for 1 loaf. So maybe it's not quite 3 cups. Excuse me. 100 grams of active starter needs to be doubled or more from your bubbles. I said mine's triple. I hope it's not falling because I'm gonna bake this bread tomorrow. Yeah, I think we're okay. And hints of love. Oh. Okay, we're putting our heart and soul into this. There's a lot of stuff to learn, so we can call it love. That's the 5th ingredient. It's my favorite one. Oh, I missed salt. 18 grams of salt. Okay, yeah. I use Redmond real salt. I won't tell you why, other than I believe this is the best salt you can possibly buy. But you can research that later if you want. Okay, so 2 adorable small little loaves of sourdough. They're like this in your hands, and you're like, this is my baby. You know, it's delightful. I literally go into the living room and I'm like, boys, look, and they're like, it's so cute, Mom. I'm like, thank you for placating me. I appreciate that. They don't care. They want to eat it. They don't care. Okay, fresh baked bread does not last very long. If you buy bread from the store, it's most likely not organic, and it's gonna stay good forever. You're like, I bought this 2 weeks ago, and it's past the expiration date, and it's still so soft, and there's no mold in sight. Well, there's a reason for that. This bread will start getting hard quickly. So, day 1 is the best day to eat it. Day 2 is okay. Day 3, we make French toast. Okay? Seriously. And it's actually wonderful for the slightly dried sourdough to make French toast with. I did that yesterday morning. It was so good. Yes, I ate some. I'm not supposed to, but I did. Let's see. I think I covered all that. No. Yes? Oh, okay. So if you do the double recipe, you may not want 2 loaves of bread today. You may only want 1 loaf of bread today because you want the second loaf to be fresh tomorrow when you have friends coming over, or you just can't eat that much bread in one day, or you don't want that much French toast. Okay. So after you mix it up, it'll bulk ferment and you'll split it into 2 pieces. One you can bake today, and the other you can put into the refrigerator for the next day. I will come back to that later, but it is possible to save 1 loaf for the next day for baking, because the dough will just sit in the fridge. But there's a time and a place for that, and it's not at any point, so timing's important for when you put it in the fridge. Let's see. Okay, the finger test, I'm mentioning that again. If your water's around 110, you're good to go. It doesn't burn you, you're like, this is great. So you warm your water up. I will not be warming my water. It's August. This is not cold. I'm just gonna make it with that. It'll probably rise fine tomorrow. I brought an ice chest here to simulate my refrigerator. This has been in it, actually, and it's looking like it's just warm enough to do what I want, so it's good. Doing all the timing with this stuff has been a challenge, okay? I had 6 jars of starter on my counter. 1 to leave at home, 1 to bring to feed in class, which is this one that's bubbly and ready to make with. I had 2 or 3 jars of starter that I was feeding so that I could give to y'all, but it is currently unfed, so that you may practice feeding it in your own jar before you take it home. So yeah, all the stuff. The bread is on its own time schedule. You cannot rush sourdough. So my bread that I made, it should have proved longer. One of them is made entirely with King Arthur flour, and it did pretty good. But the whole wheat berry is more dense than just the endosperm. And the endosperm is the white flour from the grocery store. So since it's a little more dense, it takes just a little bit longer to proof. And it wasn't ready, but I baked it anyway. And you know what? It's gonna taste really good. But it is not a perfect little ball, and that's okay. It has to be okay. I was praying, Jesus and I had a long conversation this afternoon, and I was like, how is this happening? I'm teaching a class and my bread is not right. Like, this is not working out right. And I was like, okay, it's gonna be okay. I texted Itzel. I was like, Itzel, and she's like, it's gonna taste good no matter what. So here we are. My husband gets home from work and he goes, Kara, this is the way God meant for it to be the whole time. And I'm like, what? He wanted me to bring not good bread, but this is how it worked out. So this is the way it was meant to be. This is where we're at. Okay. I'm gonna leave this up. I'm not going to read it directly. I'm just gonna start making. Now, the units you see up here is for 2 loaves. I'm not doing that, so we're gonna half everything that you see up here on the screen, okay? I'm not warming my water because I don't have a microwave. It's okay to put water in the microwave. There's no nutrients to kill in it. It's okay. So I use that for my water. You get my scale, turn it on. What are you talking about? I heard she. Oh, look it. Okay. Oh, darn. I have hair clips. I brought a hair clip and I was like, no, I'm gonna have to braid it. It would have been like down here. Not good. Okay, so I have 1,417 grams, this glass pampered chef bowl. And now it says 0 because I zeroed it out. So don't leave the weight of your bowl on here. It's not good. First, I need to pour my wheat berries. Okay, so now I'm at 0. I bumped the table and it changes. Where to put my wheat berries? Okay. Ugh. It doesn't take much, y'all, for a loaf of bread. I'm gonna do half wheat berries and half flour from the store. There's a reason for that. I'll get into that in a little bit. But 100% wheat berries, I've never gotten to give me a really good rise. I learned that I was undergrinding my flour. I learned this actually last week. And I was like, I need to grind it longer. You don't want to burn the flour by grinding it too long because Vitamixes get hot. But it was still too coarse, which means it was too heavy and it wasn't giving me a super good rise because the air just couldn't push it up. I was getting much better loaves the last couple that I did, grinding it longer. But my 100% wheat berry still was denser than I would prefer. So mixing it with the store, even though it doesn't have all the nutrients in it, gives it more of that fluff that you're looking for. I have found that absolutely everyone, 100% of people that have eaten my bread go, it's not big and fluffy, it's not squishy. And I'm like, this isn't Wonder Bread, this is Jesus bread, okay? A couple of centuries ago in Europe, they started making white bread, and it was a rich people food because poor people had these and they would grind them. Rich people were able to soak all the stuff off and bleach it and all these things, and it was horrible for them, but they had no idea. And they had the white fluffy flour, which made Wonder Bread, for lack of a better term, and they loved it. And so the poor people, when they started getting more money, they were like, oh, I want white flour too. And then everyone thought that was like the thing. And then whole grain flour just went by the wayside. But what they didn't realize they were doing was shooting themselves in the foot. This is better, a lot better. So it's not gonna have the same texture, it's not gonna have the same consistency, and it's not going to rise the same. That's okay. You know what, it actually tastes so much better. It really does. I can see a difference. I will take a bite of 100% King Arthur, and I will take a bite of 100% wheat berries, and the flavor is significant. Now, I have a very sensitive palate, so it may not be significant for you, but it's significant for me. And I mean, you may say, who cares, it's just bread, but it's more healthy for you. However, I like to mix 50-50, just because it does get closer to what people are expecting, and it gets the rise and the poof like people are expecting, but they're getting nutrients that they're not expecting. So my kids, they'll be eating bread, and like it's a sandwich with bread, meat in it. I know I'm going off on a tangent. And they're like, Mom, I'm getting full. And I'm like, finish the bread, give the meat to the dog. Not all the time, but I have said that before, because usually it's like, finish the meat, the bread's cheap, and it's empty calories. This isn't empty calories, this is good. So anyway, okay. That's 82. Okay, what's half the recipe of 500? And now I want half of that in wheat berries, so I need 250. I'm at 201. 256. 249.4, close enough. That's another thing. This is close enough, okay? This isn't engineering. It doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes I have 254, that's okay. Especially when you get to the water and you're like, whoops, that's okay. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Okay, I'm not gonna zero this out. Actually, yeah, no, that doesn't matter. I'm gonna grind. Are we ready to cover our ears? Okay, Vitamix on. It is set to 10, which is the highest power. I'm not sure if it says that on this screen. It does say it on a screen. And you'll get to that later. Okay, 1, 2, I'm serious. Allie, cover your ears. Not as loud now. At the beginning, it's bad. With it moving this much, it's not ready. It's gonna stop moving. In an effort to not overheat, I'm gonna give it a second, give it a quick shake because it'll settle in the corners. And the inside's getting ground and the outside that's against the wall is not grinding anymore. So I just kind of shook it up and now we're gonna go get it. I still hear it hitting this time. I would have stopped by now before, but then my bread wasn't rising so much. Okay, that's probably good. Okay, that's all we need is the Vitamix. Okay, we're done. Oh, if you don't want to inhale bread, open with caution. Okay, I have inhaled bread, it's not fun. Okay, I have my bowl on here. This is probably not the size bowl that I would use for doing this at home. This is my glass bowl, so this is what I brought. But I use that size bowl or bigger because it's going to almost double in size as it proofs on the counter, and this might overflow. I've never made it in this bowl, but it's clear and y'all can see it better, so that's why I use it. It gets stuck around the blades on the bottom. 242. We got in at 249 and change, and the rest of it's in here, and that's okay. That's why I'm not going to zero out the scale and add and then go 250 of other flour because this isn't even 250 yet. So I'm just gonna keep on going. I keep a scoop and a spoon in here because I feed my starter every day. So there's a spoon waiting for me to put the flour in. Okay, so this is King Arthur bread, or King Arthur all-purpose flour. I like to use bread flour. I feed the starter with all-purpose. Don't ask me why, I don't know. But I make bread with the bread flour. It's just what happened. 491. Ah, 501, close enough. I'm surprised I didn't go over. I usually am like 503, 504. Okay, there's the flour. Now I'm going to hit, no, I have my flour, but I need to mix up the starter and the water. It's all, do you have a bowl? No, you know what? I'll just pour it all back in the Vitamix. Never mind. Okay. I'll be fine. See, I have 2 bowls that I use at home, so this isn't a problem. I got so excited about the wheat berries, y'all. I forgot to mix in the starter of the water. Okay, we're back at 0 grams. That's okay that there's flour in there. It's okay. Like, it's fine. Okay. Fed bubbly starter. Oh yeah, it's falling. Okay, so we'll see how this makes tomorrow. I can let y'all know. It was up here. That's okay. That's okay. 50. Yeah, 100, half of 100 is 50. Sometimes I talk and my head stops thinking properly. 46, 52.8. Somebody can take that home later. Not my jar and my lid, but the starter. I'm gonna hit 0. I'm actually gonna put the fork in there first and then hit 0. Come on, stop. Yep. This is water from my Berkey at home. Do not use tap water. You will kill your sourdough if you use tap water. There's so much. Is this still recording? Are we good? Have you checked it? Okay, because I can just see that happening at the end and be like, oh darn, sorry. Okay, tap water has chlorine amongst all sorts of other stuff in it. It will kill your yeast. Don't use a Brita filter. The refrigerator does not count as filtered water. I'm sorry. The refrigerator will get the floaties out of your water, but it does not filter out all the bad stuff that will kill your starter. So you need either bottled water or like, the jugs that you can buy from the store. If you get water through a service like Primo, or you fill them on your own from the Primo things, or you have a Berkey or a reverse osmosis on your house or something like that. That is what you want to use. Don't use tap. Okay, where was I? Oh, stop it. It keeps going to 0.2 and then negative 0.2 and a 0 and it's a 0.2 and then negative 0.2 again. Okay, I need 350 of this, and I brought way more than 350 grams of water. I just started filling and I was like, if I get thirsty, I got extra. 336, 355, close enough. It is okay. I went slightly over on the flour too, so it all just works out in the end. Okay, give it a stir. You don't want to add the flour in yet. You want the sourdough starter to mix well with the water so you don't get clumps in there.
Why'd you put the fork in and measure it with the fork?
I hit 0. So the fork and the bowl were zeroed out anyway. The fork would get dirty sitting on the table, and I don't have a fork rest or spoon rest. I could use my towel, but it was for cleanliness sake. Okay. That was 54 grams, by the way, because this was saying negative 54. Okay, stop it. Okay, we're back at 0. I'm going to do the salt next before I put the flour in, because the salt can dissolve well in there also. 18 grams of salt. We're having the recipe, so I need 9. I'm probably going to go over. We'll see. I have a little thingy that holds my salt at home, and I use a spoon, and I just get a little bit, but I have no idea in teaspoons or tablespoons how much this is, and I don't even know. We measure in grams. It's important. These scales are only $8. You just gotta buy one. Come on, we're only at 5. I just know I'm gonna have a big rush and it's all gonna come out, It's gonna happen. I'll have a really salty bread. 6, 8, 9.1. Salt. I'm gonna stir it again. Okay. We've already weighed the flour, so I don't need to worry about that. I'm just going to dump it because it's our last ingredient anyway and get it off the scale. Yeah, can you see? If this were to double, there's not room in this bowl. Use a bigger bowl. Okay, I don't need this right now. I forgot to show y'all feeding my hungry starter, so I'll do that here in a second. So I will need the scale again because I totally skipped that. But I will show y'all how to feed the starter. This is not like commercial yeast. There is no kneading with this bread. You're not going to turn it out onto the countertop and knead it for 8 minutes. Right now, I'm just making sure everything's incorporated. At home, I use my hands. And some of y'all saw me. I wash my hands 3 times and I keep touching things. So I'm just trying not to touch it at this moment. I'll probably end up touching it. But I will be eating this tomorrow, not y'all. So that's okay. Okay, well, the kids will be eating it tomorrow. They don't care. They eat stuff off the ground. It's fine. Okay. It's close enough. Germs are healthy for your immune system. It's okay. This is what it looks like. Okay. If you use only store flour, it will look a little bit more like towards slime. Not slime, but it won't be quite this thick. The fresh ground flour absorbs water. It'll take more water. So really, if you wanted to, you could add a tiny bit more water to this recipe. Oh, hello, camera. This is what it would look like if you use half wheat berries and half flour. So let me hop back. I'm going to feed the starter and show you how to do that before I continue going straight to the next slide, which is after we mixed it, so we're not there. Okay, so this is my guy. I don't have an empty jar right here. They're all over there, and I could grab one, but I'm not going to. Jesus' mama, when she made bread, did not have a scale in her kitchen. I'm sure that's not something they wasted money on. There were scales back then. They weren't probably measured in grams. I never weigh my starter unless I'm making bread. However, I've made it enough times in the beginning, weighing everything, that I know exactly the texture that it's supposed to look like. So for y'all's sake, I'm gonna weigh it, but I don't have the weight of the stuff in here right now. So if you're doing it at home, this has bread on it, but it's okay. I can kind of see how much is in here. It's really runny. Hungry starter looks like this, okay? It's really runny. That's normal. It's supposed to. If it's thick, it's not hungry yet. And I will get into what it looks like when it's really hungry because you forgot to feed it for 48 hours and you're like, what's happening to my starter? It's got gray stuff on it. It's okay. So I'm just gonna kind of look at this and see about how much is in here. Where'd my water go? And I'm just gonna put a little bit of water in it. Basically, whatever's in here, you want to add that much water to. Now, I'm going to weigh how much water I'm putting in though, because that's how much flour I'm gonna add to it. I don't know how much starter's in there in the moment. If you want to take an empty jar and put your empty jar on the scale and then pour all that starter into the new jar so you know exactly to the 1/10 of a gram how much starter is in there, go for it. I got tired of the dishes, okay? So I just eyeball this and I'm trying to see how deep it is. If you pour too much water in it, it's okay. Because as long as you add the same amount of flour that you added water, so if I only had 25 grams of starter in there, but I just added 43.7 grams of water, I'll just add 43.7 grams of flour. It's fine. People, when they're trying to multiply their starter really fast, can do a 1:4 ratio, or 1:2, or 1:3. So if they have 50 grams of starter, they can add 200 grams of water and 200 grams of flour. Just as long as your number for the flour and water is bigger than your starting starter, then you're okay. And the flour and the water need to be equal, within reason, within 3 or 5 grams, you know. If you're off by 10 grams, then you have a little problem. I've been known to add more water because I put too much flour in there, but that's okay. So 43.7, that is what we're shooting for with my flour. I'm gonna stir this up. The density of water and the density of the starter is not too far apart from each other, but if you're comparing flour to water, it looks a lot different. Like fluid ounces is very different. Okay, I went to ounces. Fluid grams? I don't know. I've never done that before. It looks different than flour. Flour's poopy. Flour can compact, or it could be, you know, big. I talked about this earlier. That's why we weigh it. So I want 43.7 grams of this stuff. That's why I have a spoon in here. 11.4. 24.5, 37, smaller spoons. What did I say, 43 something? I'm at 42.9. 43.4, ooh, I wonder if I can do it. 43.7, I did. That's probably not a first, but I can probably count on one hand. Okay, so now I really don't need my scale again. Until later. I'll put it over here, because y'all can use it later. Let's stir this up. Now, I intentionally only brought a little bit of starter in this jar because I knew I was going to be heating it for you. If this had been fed yesterday, it would have been higher, and I would have had to pour some off to discard, which is what's in this jar. I've been collecting it. There's somewhere around 700 grams, and so if everyone gets 25 grams, that's enough for 30 people, and we have less than 30 people here. So there's 25 or 30 grams I can give you, and when you feed it, you're adding 25 or 30 of water, and then that much again of flour. So you're gonna have anywhere from 75 to 100 grams, depending if you get a little over on your flour or water or not. That's okay. Okay, I usually use a butter knife for this, only because it's easier to scrape the sides of the jar. Now, did you see how fast I was stirring this? Has anybody made bread with yeast from the store before? Yeah, do we whip it like that? No, it'll die. This won't die. Not from doing that. It likes being stirred like that. You need to stir it up really good. And so now is where I would take my rubber band, which is imaginary because it's at home, and I didn't bring a Sharpie, but I would put it on and I would just mark this line right here. So now this is fed starter. In about 4 hours tonight, it will be up here, okay? So this is where we were up here 4 hours ago. So I started here. 4 hours later is where I was before I made bread with it, okay? And it's not there anymore because I pulled off of it. Now you pull off of it and you're like, I've got bubbles, but it's not the same line anymore and my bubbles are gone. Oh no, is it still hungry? Well, yeah, you just popped the bubbles, but the yeast hasn't changed. So it's way down here, and it looks like close to the level it would have been when you fed it. That's okay. You just pop the bubbles. It's going to keep eating at the same rate as it would have had you not touched it. And that's fine. You still do not want to feed it until your feeding time, whatever that is. For me, it's usually between 7 and 9:30 in the morning because it fluctuates for me. It's not supposed to. You're supposed to do it on schedule, but life, right? So I'll feed it in the morning. Actually, one of you is probably going to take this home, so you can feed it tomorrow. Okay, where were we? Bread. Stretch and folds. This is an optional thing. Oh, Itzel, did we have our sheets? The sheets? Did you print the sheets with this?
Yes.
Oh, yes, okay. Itzel's gonna pass those out. This has the ratios of the starter, the recipe on it, and everything to do for the bread. We also have pens up here. If you want a pen, she can hand those out too. To take notes at the bottom, or if you have a question or whatever, to jot it down. But this is the basic steps. Now you'll see the stretch and folds are in italics on your sheet. They're not required. I did stretch and folds in the beginning, and I was like, I don't notice a difference whenever I skip the stretch and folds, and that's just a time consumer for me. Like, I can whip up bread and leave the house and go run errands, but if you're doing stretch and folds, you need to be around in an hour, and then every 30 minutes, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 times. It's up to you how many times you want to stretch and fold. I'm going to demonstrate what that looks like, but you don't have to do it. But it is supposed to develop the gluten more. And strong gluten means a good spring in your bread. Again, I haven't noticed a difference, but whatever. So this is what it looked like as soon as I mixed it up, okay? We're going to pretend that 4 to 8 hours has gone by. In the wintertime, it could be 10 or 12. You may make this at nighttime, wake up in the morning, and it's still not done bulk proofing. And that is what this stage is called, is whenever it doubles and almost doubles. Sometimes it won't fully double, but if it's kind of got a smooth texture on the top and it's slightly pulling, it kind of looks like a pillow, and it's slightly pulling away from the edges of the jar, and you touch it and it's not sticky on your fingers, like it'll kind of poof in and then almost fully spring back, but not quite. That is the perfect time to go ahead and shape your dough. Today, mine didn't get to that stage, but I told that dough, I have a class tonight, so I'm baking you anyway. And I will show you what bread looks like when you do that. So this is what it looks like when you mix it up. And after you've mixed it, which I made this earlier today, this, if I tilt it, it's gonna run. Hello, screen, okay. Screen gets to see it first, barely. So it has a tiny slight rounding to it, and it's kind of pulling away from the edges, but you see how it's kind of got a slope? So you can clearly see air bubbles in it, and as soon as this hit the spot where I thought it would need to stop bulk fermenting, I stuck it in the fridge for the class. You can do that at home too, but first, before putting it in the fridge, you would shape the dough, which I'm going to show you how to do here in a second. Putting it in the fridge slows down the yeast from eating almost entirely, and you basically just pause in time. But the yeast and bacteria, 2 different terms, the yeast stops eating, so it stops letting off the gases. But in the fridge, the bacteria continues to eat, and it will make your dough have a more sour, well-developed flavor and aroma. So people who get that really rich, tart sourdough flavor usually have had it refrigerated for a while during, like after the bulk fermentation. This was in the fridge for, I don't know, a little bit. That's got ice in it because I didn't want it to overproof and then me show y'all something that was not appropriate. So here, I'm gonna touch the bread now. Stretch and folds. So, not wax paper, we went over that. Okay, let me just read this. There may be something I haven't gone over. So you start at the top and you stretch the dough outwards and fold it over the middle. So I'm gonna start at the top of the bowl at 12 o'clock, okay? I'm looking at a clock. I'm gonna kind of get my fingers. You see how stretchy it is? It's breaking. This didn't proof long enough. It should not break, okay? It should just stretch. It's okay, it'll still taste good. I rotate the bowl 90 degrees, give it a stretch, fold it over the middle. I do it again, and then one more time, and it should not quite be this sticky, and it shouldn't break, but that was your stretch and folds. I used 4 times, right? 12, 3, 6, and 9, but I rotated the bowl, so it's at 12 o'clock 4 times. Then you have a shaggy ball of dough. Let's see, it ferments for hours, covered on the counter before you need to touch it again. There's no kneading. So you mix it up from this step that I made here. You mix it up and you just set and you walk away. Like it's not pretty. It's not shaped into a bowl, like a ball. You just walk away. And it will swell up in the bowl like I showed you here. And then that's when you start the stretch and folds. So that is the end of the bulk fermentation. Is when it has fully risen in here. I should not have stretched and folded this dough. I did the wrong one, y'all. I did the wrong one. That is the one you stretch and fold after it's rested for an hour. I know I'm messing this up. I'm so sorry. So this that I freshly made, it's fine. I'm about to shape that anyway. This that you just freshly mixed up after an hour. You see how that's stretchy? This is actually doing better. That's still a little bit cold. That may be why it broke. Yours wouldn't be cold at this point. But again, the class made me do different things. And now I'm learning those different things don't always yield what my brain says they will. You don't. Okay, so that one stretched nicely. See, it's kind of fun. If you wait an hour, it'll stretch out kind of far. Store flour stretches better than wheat berries do. When you grind the wheat berries, it's just still not as powdery as the store-bought stuff is. That's okay. You're getting all the nutrients from it. So it may not look the same as your Wonder Bread, but that's okay. This is what we stretch and fold. And you do that every 30 minutes after an hour has passed. So at the 1 hour mark, I mix it up and I wait an hour. And then at an hour and a half, you can do it again. And then at the 2 hour mark, again, we're starting from the beginning. As soon as I mix it, you do it again. 2.5 and then 3. But you don't have to. I don't do that. I mix it and I walk away. I don't touch it. And my bread turns out well. Not these, because I rushed them. But they turn out well. Okay, so we're gonna fast forward. It is bulk fermented on the counter. In the summertime, it takes mine about 6 hours. So this is 6 hours later, okay? So I have my bread. And I'm gonna scrape it out of the bowl. I missed some. Yours shouldn't be quite this sticky, okay? But I'm going to kind of take and pull apart and then fold back on the bottom. What I'm doing is trying to create surface tension on the outside of the bread. Should not be this sticky. I've dealt with stickier and I didn't know why. I know why now. It's because it wasn't done fermenting. Don't add flour to it. It shouldn't need that. If you absolutely have to, you can. It's okay. But I'm starting to get, it's not super smooth. If this were 100% King Arthur flour, it would be a little bit smoother on the surface. It will almost look like glass, right? But with wheat berries, it is what it is. So that's about as close as I can get. I will not put it back in this bowl. I will end up putting it in a different bowl. I don't have a sink.
Do you want me to go get some wet paper towels for you?
I'm gonna see what happens if I just do this. I'll just have to wash it when we're done. Yeah, this is working. It's just getting kind of crumbly. Ew. Okay, so the bulk fermentation is finished. The second part is called, I have an apron. It's great. We need to vacuum this area right here. The second phase is called proofing. That only takes about an hour. Some websites say it can take as many as 4 hours. I usually only wait 1. Proofing is when it will rise a little bit, but it is not like commercial yeast. Commercial yeast, however big your bread is, when it goes in the oven, that's how big it is, right? This is not like that. This is going to rise in the oven a lot. Let's see. Dough balls. If you did a double recipe, the 1,000 grams, you would break it into 2 balls at this point. I only did a half recipe, so I only have the 1 ball. I showed you how to pull the bread, creating surface tension, and now I'm gonna have a clean bowl, which I don't have, so I'm gonna use my dirty bowl. And I'm gonna take my parchment paper. And let's pretend this, oh, okay, I gotta get it back out again. Come here, come here. It shouldn't be this sticky. So this is the clean bowl. Okay, it's gonna go back in here. Ah, it's not pretty, because I just messed it up, but that's okay. It'll still taste good. So I'm gonna put it in here and it's gonna sit in here for an hour. I gotta do this whole thing again. It's gonna sit right there for an hour. So I set a timer on my phone, and in about 45 minutes, I come and turn the oven on. Because after an hour has passed, you want to put it in. So you need your oven warm. The oven needs to warm up with the cast iron in it. The lid and the cast iron pot. I might be getting slightly ahead of myself because I want to talk about, yeah, hold on. Put it in the parchment, okay. Oh good, I'm actually exactly where I'm supposed to be. I didn't know that. Okay, we're gonna talk about steam for a second. You need a Dutch oven with a lid. You can make sourdough bread in a loaf pan. I'll tell you how, but this is the most ideal scenario. A cast iron Dutch oven is what you want because it traps in the steam. In order for your dough to go from looking like this to actually looking like a thing of bread, it's gotta rise, and to rise it needs steam. So it's crucial for the sourdough to rise with steam. It didn't rise during that 1 hour resting. It maybe got a little bit poofier, a little bit bigger, but it's gonna look mostly the same as it did before. And you're like, this is gonna be a really tiny ball of dough, right? Why isn't it bigger? In the first 20 minutes in the oven, with it covered, I go 22 minutes, my recipe. 22 minutes with it covered, it goes from looking like this guy.
Which one is it?
Minus the color, it'll look like this, okay? I will show you the scoring here in a second, but this isn't even a good rise because I didn't let it ferment properly because I was like, hey, I got a class, I'm just gonna cook it, right? So usually it's a little bit taller and a little bit rounder, but you see where it's split up the seam? All of this happened in the oven with the lid on. If you didn't have a lid on it, it wouldn't do this. So it's very important to have it covered. I will tell you a quick how to do it in a loaf pan here in a second. If you don't have a cast iron, it can be made in a loaf pan by throwing ice cubes in the bottom of the oven. I know that sounds weird. First time I did it, I was like, there's something wrong with this. Is this okay? Am I gonna break my oven? I grabbed a fistful of ice, and with the cast irons hot in the oven, you pull the cast iron out and you put your bread in it. I'm sorry, this is without a cast iron. You have your loaf pans are warm in the oven. You pull them out, you need to spray them or parchment line. Parchment's better. You can spray. I prefer parchment paper. This will do 1 bread loaf pan. So doing the double recipe obviously will do 2. So you put them in and then you close the door because you want to hold the heat in, and then I get a fistful of ice and I toss them in the bottom of the oven and shut the door really fast, okay? So all of the ice, as it melts, it's gonna almost go immediately to turn to steam. So now you've basically created a sauna inside your oven, and the bread likes the steam, and so then that's how you get your rise. It's very good. This is better, but it's very good, and I've done it many times. Then you can get like almost sandwich slices, you know, because it's in a bread pan, it's a rectangle, and you get pretty slices. Doing it this way, it's in a circle. So sometimes I opt to do the loaf pan even though I have a Dutch oven, but classic sourdough is done in a circle. We need steam, okay? That's the most important part. You need steam. Without steam, you don't get good bread. Back to the bread. For my recipe, it says to preheat to 450. So I put the cast iron in with the lid on it, preheat it to 450. When it's done preheating, I pull the cast iron out, shut the door really fast to hold the heat in, right? I don't have an oven here, but I figured it would be very important to have a visual. Don't grab your empty cast iron pot with your bare hands. 450 degrees hurts, okay? I've done it. It's not fun. You would think you wouldn't do it until you've done it and you're like, that was real stupid, okay? I wasn't thinking, and I was like, my bread's on the counter, this is fine. I mean, I put cast iron skillets in the oven, and I usually cook with them on the stovetop, right? Same thing. Grab the handle out of the stove, and I'm like, what was I thinking? It's not fun, okay? Use your pot holders. If you have them that go up the arms, that's better, because you're reaching in there and you're picking up, this is heavy, it's cast iron. You're gonna end up touching something in your arms, and we don't want to talk about that anymore. It hurts, don't do it. Okay, the parchment. It has proofed in here. It's hot, okay? This is hot, it just came out of the oven. Don't forget to use the pot holders. I put it on top of the lid so I don't grab the lid with my hand too. So this is gonna be, I'm gonna double the parchment only because the bowl is gross, I need a clean bowl. So I'm gonna come in here and I'm just gonna smush it in the bottom. Okay. No, I'm not doing that. I just burned my hands. Do you see this? This is bad. Okay. No. Okay. This typically wouldn't be like this because the parchment would be here with the bread and I would just lift up and move. But I didn't do that because my bread's sticky, so this is fine. This is hot. I'm gonna go like that, okay? I'm gonna lift this, and then I'm gonna do this number, and I'm gonna finish, bring it over, and it's like, ouch! I can still feel it. It's 450 degrees, the lid's now burning my hand. Boom. Okay, I'm done. Now I'm gonna go back into the oven. I'm gonna pick her up, and I'm gonna put it in the oven. Okay, we're not gonna see that one for a little bit. And we set a timer. It's been 22 minutes. I open the oven, I take the lid off, and I close the oven again, okay? We wait another 22 minutes. And out we come with this. It would be on parchment paper. You know, I just lift the parchment and go straight to a cooling rack. I have the cooling racks for my cookies. You don't have to. You can set it on the stove. It'll get sweaty on the bottom if it's directly on a countertop. So that's why I set it on like a cookie rack. You have a trivet, just anything to just lift it up that can kind of get some air underneath it. In the first hour, it's not ideal to cut into sourdough because while it's warm, you can kind of smush it when you're cutting into it, and then it gets like a gummy texture to it. It can. Now, we've eaten it after it's been out of the oven for 10 minutes, and it tasted good. And it didn't really get gummy, but it can. And so, if you have friends coming over and you want to impress them, don't cut into it for an hour. It'll still be a little bit warm, and that's okay. That's perfect. And so, here's the bread. I know I missed something. Let's see. Remove the parchment. Okay, cooling rack. I didn't miss anything at all. I did. Okay, we already talked about this. Do not panic if you want bread now and you do not have a Dutch oven. You use the ice Q-tip, and that's okay. I re-described all of this to you, so I'm just gonna click to the next one. When you're baking with wheat berries, they're dense. Your bread can be more like a flying saucer and not a soccer ball. That's okay. It tastes really good. The bread only gets super light and fluffy when baked only with the endosperm, i.e. store-bought flour. I know I said that before. It's just heavier. It weighs more, but you get all the nutrients. So with that weight, you go, I'm getting all the vitamins. I'm going to show you pictures. Let's see. I prefer to do a mixture of wheat berries to store-bought and store-bought King Arthur flour, so I do about 50-50. So in blue, you can't read this, but I will tell you what it says. The ones on the left are almost a soccer ball. Those are just King Arthur flour. You see this guy? This is what happens when you don't ferment it long enough. I do not have a soccer ball here. This looks like a volcano. That's what Luke told me before I left. He goes, it's a volcano, Mom. And I'm like, don't touch it. Because he was like coming in, you know, he wanted to get that little black piece right there. And I was like, no. So, okay. This should be closer to a soccer ball. I have a flying saucer where I use, this isn't quite 50-50, it's 60-40, but I use 300 grams of fresh ground flour and 200 grams of bread flour. If you go 250, it'll still look about like that. And underproofed, it's even closer to a flying saucer. It's cute. It's because I had a schedule today and it didn't cooperate with my schedule. But it's gonna taste really yummy. People score these, they get all sorts of art, okay? I tried. I'm crafty in many ways, but when you have bread dough and you're slicing it with a knife, I need to show you how to score the bread. When you're slicing it with a knife, it's not easy. So, okay, that's one loaf. This one is also 50-50. I attempted a leaf, the main stem, and there's things coming off. This is where it was supposed to rise. It didn't. Neither one of them did. Okay? I don't have a nice pretty split like I do with this one. And they fermented the same, actually this one fermented shorter because I baked it first. But because it was only store-bought flour, it was able to rise some, but I under-fermented them. They probably needed 2 or 3 more hours on the counter. But I'm sorry. You can still eat it. I need to go back and show you how to score this. I thought I was done with it. So, right before you put it in the oven, before you put it in the hot cast iron, it's not hot yet, right? When it's still in this bowl, I usually just pull it out and sit it on the countertop because it's easier. Oh, I can do that. Okay, so it's here. I'm going to take some flour and go woo. And go woo again. Doo-doo-doo. Okay, kind of dust it out. Now remember, you've had the bulk ferment And then you had the 1 hour after you've shaped it into a ball. You've had 1 hour of it sitting on the counter. Your oven's hot. You pulled your cast iron out, and you're like, now it's time to put the bread in it, right? Right before you do, like immediately before you put the bread in the cast iron. This is not pretty at all. You dust it with flour. It'll be a little poofier than this. And then with a really sharp knife, you can take it and give it a couple of slices. You want them to be decently deep. If you cut slowly, it's gonna stick to your knife and it's just gonna pool, okay? So you gotta go fast. So now we have like these cuts on it. That is where it will rise. If you don't cut, it's okay. It's just gonna crack on the sides and it's not gonna be as pretty, but it's gonna taste great. It will find a way to split itself, even if you don't give it a spot to split from. I've done it. I was like, oh well, it's fine. It's fine. It just had like cracks on the side. What? It tasted great. And that is what matters. Okay, so, sorry I skipped that step. This over here is 100% wheat berries on the far right. I tried to keep my ratios, like where I held the camera and the distance the same. And really, they looked almost the same to me. And this, so, okay, the middle picture was before I was grinding my wheat berries all the way. And this one was after I ground the wheat berries more. After I was like, oh my goodness, because I've been doing research trying to figure out why some people are having this amazing, beautiful soccer ball with 100% ground wheat berries. So I'm still learning too. I don't know all the things, right? This rice is that good because I ground it more. And so that would have been even flatter. Like this guy, had I not done that. So that's why they look about the same. But in general, the more wheat berries you have, the less soccer ball-esque they become. But they taste the same. It's just, it's harder to make sandwiches with. If your house is anything like mine, the vultures descend very quickly with fresh bread, and they devour it, or maybe a third of it. So, to store the rest of your sourdough bread, you either put it in a tea towel, like I have with these. Right? This is my prettiest tea towel that I brought with me, so I'm going to show you this one. So here's my tea towel, and I just kind of put it in the middle and wrap it as best I can. Once it's already cut, I put cut side down first, and then wrap it up, and it just sits on the counter like this. If you put it in a plastic baggie, it's not going to go well. It's going to sweat, no matter what, because the yeast in here, for some reason, they're still putting off gases or something, and you get condensation inside your bag, even after it's totally cooled off. And I looked online, and everyone's like, never put sourdough in a plastic bag, ever. You put it in a paper bag, or in one of these. But a paper bag doesn't seal it any more than this does, and tea towels are prettier, and they're easier to get into, and the husband doesn't leave them open on the counter. Well, okay, he does. And then I come by and I wrap it, so it's fine. It's fine. Let's see. It goes stale fast, right? After 48 hours, we're making French toast. You don't want to eat it. It might hurt your teeth. You can make croutons. There's other things like bruschetta, you know, on top of it, like if they're cut really thin. What else? What else can you make with the stale-ish bread? Because it's not bad. It's just hard. Yeah, croutons. Mm-hmm. What's that? Stuffing. Yeah, stuffing at Thanksgiving. So you can make bread with this. And, okay, yeah, I like it. Let's see, dough in the fridge. So if you did it with 1,000 grams, right, you have one loaf that you've just made here, and your other loaf, we'll pretend this one's it. This was my second loaf, and he's just hanging out in the refrigerator, and it's been a whole day, and now I'm like, oh, he's cold, and he's ready to eat, it smells good, and it's going to have poofed a little bit after 24 hours in the fridge. You'll just pull it out, you'll shape it again, you'll put it on parchment paper. Actually, if it's already on parchment paper, that's even better. Because as soon as it's done bulk fermenting, you've separated it, you've shaped them both in a ball, put it on parchment and then put it in a thing, like a glass bowl. In the fridge, I use these and I just cover it in the fridge. Don't make it seal. Keep fridge tastes out of your bread and condensation in, right? So you'd open it up and then you'd pull out your parchment and put it into your very hot Dutch oven, these pot holders, and then just bake it right away. It does not need to come up to room temperature. You can let it come up to room temperature. I will frequently just pull it out and set it on the counter while the oven's heating up, and then from there it just goes straight in. But it's ready to go. It did its bulk ferment, and the proofing time, that's 1 hour. If you did it on the counter, like yesterday, we did proofing for 1 hour, and then we made the bread. Basically, that 24 hours in the fridge took the place of that. So you just need to bake it. And now you have another loaf of fresh bread. This bread will have a more sour flavor, and not just sour, like it's just got more flavor because like I said, the bacteria is still able to keep eating on it, and it gives it more of a sourdough taste. Whereas the other stuff the day before is going to be a more mild sourdough. It will still taste like sourdough. It will just be a little more mild. So you bake the second one the second day. Don't forget to flour the top so your knife doesn't stick to it so badly, and score it before you put it in the oven. But if you do, it's okay. It'll crack where it wants to. Lots of recipes for sourdough and for sourdough discard. Look for them online. A Google search will give you 15 million. I did not look them all up for you because that would have taken us a week. Let's see, troubleshooting. Okay. Amy had this happen to her. Amy Freeman got mold in her starter. She's not here tonight. But Amy, I've been told a couple of things could be the culprit. Either we're not feeding it on the proper schedule, it's going too long. It's way too hot in the house, and so really, if it's in the 90s in your kitchen all the time, it needs to be fed every 12 hours. In the summertime, you can't just stick to the 24-hour schedule if it's that warm. But the ideal temperature range is around 75, so 70 to 80. If it's any warmer than that, you may need to feed your starter more often. Also, you could have mold growing in your house somewhere. The spores are in the air, and now they're going into your starter. It may not be anything you're doing wrong, but your starter may save your life. No, I don't know. If you have mold in your house, you might want to know about that, right? So it's worth looking into. Okay, so it can look like that. It's gross. I've never had this happen to me before. I've never gotten mold, but it can happen. So if you see this, do not cook with your starter. It needs to go in the trash. Just don't. That's gross. Fruit flies. I've had fruit flies. That's fun. So I had one fruit fly out of my jar. So you see these lids, you want it loose so gases can come out. So if you crank it down, that's a problem. But we keep the lid on it to keep the bugs out. Well, fruit flies are tiny. They're itty bitty. And if you have been feeding your starter for 3 weeks without washing the jar, like I do, this jar's clean around the edges, okay? After so many weeks of stirring, and then this is on the edge, and I'm like doing this number, you know, ooh, I just got some on me for reals. That was supposed to be pretend. It will get a white film of flour or starter that's dehydrated on the edge, and it's all in the grooves, and it's up here. And that's okay until the bugs come. So with this is not a butter knife. My butter knifes are over there, but with the edge of my butter knife, I kind of go like this around the edge of the jar, and all the little flakies fall off. And when I can see clear glass again, I know I'm good, because I'm making a decent seal here. I didn't do that in April. And so one little fruit fly, he got in the cracks of the dehydrated starter, because this wasn't sitting flat, because the starter was at different levels around the edge, very slight, but fruit flies are tiny. And I just know he laid eggs in my starter. And so I was very sad. And then I remembered I shouldn't be so sad, because I had starter in the freezer. Okay, so this is our backup plan. We need a backup plan. If you forgot to feed your starter and it's sat hungry and neglected on the counter for 3 days, and you encounter 2 problems, we're gonna come back to the other stuff. I promise you. This is something different. Why is there gray liquid on top, and where are my bubbles? Okay, the gray liquid called hooch. Smells like alcohol, because that's what it is. It is okay. It is a byproduct of the sourdough. That's the sour part of the sourdough. It is an alcohol. I'm not talking about alcohol from the liquor store, but it will smell very similar to that. Some people pour it off. Some people pour half of it off. I just stir it all back in. It's like, you came out of here, you're going right back in. Okay? and it tastes so good when you bake with it. It's so good. But that just means that it's hungry. It's saying, please feed me. You're neglecting me. This is sad. So you stir it back in. I stir it back in. After you feed it, you may be like, why isn't this bubbling? Right? Okay, well, you've just almost starved your starter. It is sad. He was so hungry, and now you fed him, and he's like, come back in a couple days. No. You need to feed it consistently on schedule, and after 3 or 4 days, you should have a good rise happening with your bubbles. After 1 day, you should see at least 4 or 5 bubbles in your jar. If you do, it's alive. If you have no bubbles after 48 hours, we're gonna get to that slide. This is the backup plan, okay? Everyone, this is very important. You need a backup plan. If it gets mold or fruit flies, or if you starve it to death, okay? You need to know what to do. So what do? You can freeze it. I freeze 50 grams. About every 2 or 3 months, I'm like, I'm gonna freeze some of this discard. I don't use the fed stuff. I just take some discard, pour it in a Ziploc baggie. A freezer bag. I mean, come on. We don't want freezer burn. Freezer burn's bad. Take my Sharpie and I'm like, May 2024. And I put it in the freezer and I forget about it. And so when I move, I find like 15 bags of starter. And I'm like, oh, they're only good for about 6 months in the freezer. It may be good longer, but mine was 4 months old and it came back to life because of fruit flies. Oh, horrible little bugs. Hate them. Okay, you can dehydrate it. I haven't ever done this. Itzel, you've done this, or were you given some?
I dehydrated it, but I didn't use a machine. I just put a thin layer on parchment paper and put it in the oven and left it for like 2 days.
She did not turn the oven on, okay? She just set it in there to keep the bugs out of it. It's just dehydrating on its own using air, which is great. And then you'll have flakes. You see the jar, kind of? It's got flakes in it. That's what it'll look like. It just kind of crumbles, and then it's good for, I don't know how long it's good for, a long time. Yeah, it should be good forever. Because there's no water in it. There's nothing to make it go bad. That's time consuming and I haven't done it. I just put starter in the freezer. I think I have 3 baggies in there now and probably 1 or 2 of them should be thrown away. But if I have a constant rotation, just randomly throwing some in there, I know I'm gonna have some that has been within the last 6 months. So next time I get fruit flies, here's that. When you do thaw out the starter from the freezer, it's not gonna bubble right away because he's cold. Okay, you've made him very cold. But a day later, I had 4 bubbles, and I was dancing in my kitchen. I was like, yes, it's alive, because I had never had to do this before. I had the backup plan, but I hadn't done it until April. So I had 4 bubbles. The next day, I had like a 50% rise, right? And I usually have a 200% rise. So it wasn't doubling, but it was rising. I was like, yes. 4 days after I pulled it from the freezer, I made bread with it, and it was wonderful. Okay, so that's the backup plan. Now, you say, Kara, I'm not going to have any of these problems. If all else fails, when you have these problems, you can order one on Amazon, or you can beg your friends because you failed to freeze or dehydrate your own. Be like, please give me more starter. Or if you get mold, things happen. So, just have a backup plan. It's so easy to stick them in the freezer. And I'm talking just like a tablespoon and a half. A glob. It doesn't take much. It was maybe 35 grams, 40 grams. It's just a little bit. It's just enough to feed it. Okay. When you are desperately trying to follow all these steps and you get really, really overwhelmed, I want you to remember the Pirates Code. We've seen Pirates of the Caribbean, y'all. I'm dating myself. They're more guidelines than actual rules. If the scale's not perfect, it's okay. I said that so many times, but it is. It's okay. These were not perfect. They're really not perfect because they're underproofed or under-fermented. But I was over by 4 or 5 grams, or I put a little bit too much of this, and sometimes I'm like, let me just a little more flour, and it's all right. It still tastes good. The bread is flour and water, because that's the starter, plus the wild yeast from the air. Salt is optional, really. It makes bread taste better. Olive oil, some recipes have olive oil. That makes the bread taste better. I like this recipe. But you don't have to have salt. Really, it's just flour, water, and yeast that the Lord has provided for us. This yeast is in the air around you. Like, I never thought about that until I started with sourdough. But please don't do this. I have starter for you. But if you're gonna make your own starter from scratch, you literally go 50-50 flour and water, and then with your spoon, you go outside, and I open my sliding glass door, and I step out, and I'm like this, in the air. I'm literally like this. I'm getting the yeast from the air, and I whip it for like 5 minutes, right? And it still takes 2 to 4 weeks for it to be strong enough to try to make, let's call it baby bread. Because the bread is, it's still such a baby starter. I have a mature starter, you don't have that problem, but that's where it comes from, it's just in the air. And so you've caught the yeast, you've caught it from the air, and now it's in your jar, and it smells so good. Y'all can sniff the starter, it's totally fine. If you wanna come up here and smell it, I sniff it literally every day. I do. I open the jar and I'm like, it's like, okay, I'm gonna feed you. I'm tell the kids, I'm like, I gotta go feed Millie. And they're like, okay, Mom, whatever. Sniffing my starter. Okay, all the instructions are on this sheet. Do y'all have any questions? Yes. One more time. Long fermenting. Okay, long fermenting is called cold fermenting. It's actually cold retarding. I think that's the right word because you're slowing it down. That cannot be done for the bulk ferment. The bulk ferment has to be done on the counter. So I have stomach problems. I have GI issues galore. Most of the time I don't even eat sourdough bread anymore. I can't, but I make it for my family. I love it. It tastes delicious. My French toast, I had a piece of French toast. It was okay. No, the French toast tasted delicious. It was okay with me. If I eat store-bought bread, like all bets are off. It's a problem. If you make the sourdough, you bulk ferment it on the counter. Say it's summertime and it's hot in your kitchen, you know, it's like 85, whatever, I don't know. It might take 5 hours for it to bulk ferment, right? It's doubled in size, it's pulling away from the edges, it's got a little bit of the pillowing, you can see bubbles in there, right? And you're like, okay, this is ready, you touch it and it's not sticky, right? It is done, it's ready to go. If it's still sticky, it needs more time. You pull it out, you shape it into the ball, you put it on your parchment, you put it in your bowl, and that's when you put it in the fridge. So that second of the two, how I described, the second one was cold fermented. The first one wasn't. Now the first one is just, that's how you make normal sourdough. Jesus' mama didn't have a refrigerator to put it in. My refrigerator's only been around for 100 and something years. Like, I doubt anyone did that before. We can do that now, and it develops the flavor. It also is better for people who have GI problems. So if you can put it in the fridge for 24 hours, that's great. Once you hit 36 hours, you'll really need to pull it out and bake with it. Because I've left it in there for 48 hours before, and I got this. It can be a little fickle. Sometimes if you underdo it, it's like this, and if you overdo it, it's like this. So 24 hours is like the magic number. It's just enough to be that much better for people who have GI issues, but it's not so much that your bread won't rise, right? Of course, I went under there. All sourdough has cut down on the gluten because of the yeast in the sourdough. It eats on the gluten. So it seems counterintuitive. You need a flour that's high in protein because that develops good gluten, but as it ferments on the counter, it is eating at that, and in the end, it has far less gluten in it than store-bought bread does. So, like Itzel's daughter has, you know, she can't eat gluten most of the time, but she's been able to eat sourdough lately, and she's not having any problems.
That's why I'm learning all the years.
That's why she's here. So I mean, try it. I can't have anything with gluten in it, but I will occasionally have a little bit of sourdough, and it's not perfect. But I still eat it from time to time because it's not super bad either. Like, I'm not having severe reactions to it. Let's see. Did I answer your question? Was there something else? I feel like I missed it. Okay. So putting it in the fridge for 24 hours, only after it's done the bulk ferment on the counter. It has to have the time on the counter first, at room temperature. Yes?
So the starter, you're feeding it,
Mm-hmm.
it rises,
Yes.
but I don't want to make it for a couple days. Does it just go back down?
Yep. Yep.
It goes back down.
So what goes up must come down. There's a song about that, and I'm like typing at the sides, and I'm like, what goes up must come down. I don't know what the song is. But anyway, yes. So it'll just rise and fall every single day.
And you do have to get rid of some of it though?
Every day when you go to feed it, however much is in there is how much you have to add of flour and water. So I highly recommend pouring some off.
You just get rid of it, or?
Most of the time I put it in the trash. But if I know that I'm going to be baking something fun this week, like sourdough discard waffles, or sourdough discard cinnamon rolls, or chocolate cake, or focaccia, is that how you said the bread? Focaccia bread, or whatever else you made over there. Itzel made all sorts of stuff with sourdough starter discard. That's amazing for recipes. If you're making regular pancakes, and you're like, I paid for this flour, I'm not putting it in the trash can. You don't have to make a sourdough starter discard pancake, man, that's a mouthful, pancake recipe. You got your batter on the counter and you're like, pour the discard bucket in there. That's okay. Stir it into the pancake. I've totally done that. Like, you're getting the good bacteria and yeast from the discard, because the discard, it's not been fed recently, but you're keeping it in the fridge, so it's alive. It's just not super active. If you use super active starter, almost for anything other than bread, you're gonna have, let's say my cinnamon rolls. I was just like, I'm gonna make cinnamon rolls, but I'm making it with active starter. not gonna use my discard. My cinnamon rolls fell apart in my hands. Like the dough was so airy, I had like flakes of dough. Like it wouldn't stay together. That's why you use the discard, because it's too strong unless you're making bread. So the discard is literally almost for every other recipe that you want to use sourdough for. And those recipes will have it fermenting on the counter using the discard. And so you're still getting a lot of the benefits of the sourdough starter, but in other kinds of foods. But yeah, don't use active starter for other foods like that. Yes, ma'am.
Can you use alkaline water for your water?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What, Kristen? Oh, I have Ziploc brand, Tupperware. Ziploc with the semi-disposable containers, Rubbermaid containers, whatever you want, with just a lid on it. I just literally stick it in a container with a lid and put it in the fridge. And so whenever if I'm adding discard to it every day, as opposed to putting my discard in the trash or down the drain, I just pour off, and I'm stirring in my jar. Okay, it's like this, and then I'm stirring in my jar, and I'm pouring, and I'm looking in the jar, and I'm like, that's about how much I want to keep. And whatever's left down here, I take my fork, and I just stir it into the rest of the discard, instead of leaving it on top. It almost barely feeds the discard that was already in the fridge, because this is newer discard. And I can't help but think it helps. And then I just put it back in the fridge with it covered. Ruth?
So when you freeze it, you do the active starter, not the discard.
Yeah, I feed it and then freeze it. I'm sure it doesn't matter. I just always used active starter. Yes.
So I have soft white and hard red at home. You said you like hard white.
Hard white has more protein. Red has a slightly different flavor, and it's used more for pastries. But try it.
Okay. My friend gave it to me for my birthday.
It'll still make
So what
bread.
happens when you're 46? You get wheat berries for your birthday.
That is awesome, though. That's awesome. Okay, if you add it up, how much the wheat berries are versus buying the store-bought flour, it's $2 a pound for King Arthur flour, and it's $1.33 for wheat berries at the price that I bought them for. I personally currently have around 65 to 70 pounds of wheat berries. I brought 2/3 of that with me tonight. I also have baggies, so I mentioned this earlier, but if you want to try it and get some wheat berries, I have my scale in a baggie, and I will give you 3 pounds. You give me $4, right? Because $1.33, right? It's math. So $4, and you can have 3 pounds. And how much? I don't remember. I think a full loaf of bread, if it's only wheat berries, is 1.1 pounds. So if you're doing half and half, you can get 6 loaves-ish, right? If you're doing all wheat berries, you're looking at close to 3 loaves of bread from 3 pounds of flour.
And use the same amount of flour, even if it's freshly ground.
Yeah, you weigh it the same way. Yeah. So, and you, like you said, I could do any ratio. So this one's all King Arthur, and this is half King Arthur, half bread flour. Actually, I think this one was like 280 of fresh flour, and then whatever the remaining was of the King Arthur, just because I had the wheat berries ground. If you have extra wheat berries and you're like, oh, I didn't need these, I did too many, put them in the freezer. You will lose a little bit of the nutrients from it, but you can freeze that stuff for weeks and then pull the flour out and use it with other things. Now, I wouldn't feed my starter with it for 2 reasons. First, it's coming from the freezer, it's very cold. So your starter's gonna take longer to rise because it's cold, right? It's better to use room temperature flour, room temperature water when you're feeding your starter every day. The other reason is, okay, well, there's 3 reasons. The other one is, whatever you've been feeding it with is what you want to keep feeding it with. So this has been fed with all-purpose flour that's King Arthur. So ideally, that's what you want to keep using. If you switch to something else, you have a different brand that's all-purpose, but it's organic, I'm sure it's fine. For a while, I was feeding it fresh ground flour, and this is reason 3, it eats it fast. Really fast. So if you don't want to be in the business of feeding your starter every 12 hours, don't feed it fresh ground flour. And if you grind up, okay, so it would be very tedious to freshly grind flour twice a day and wash your stuff twice a day to feed your starter. And if you're like, oh, I'll just do a bunch and put it in the freezer, well, now you're putting really cold fresh ground flour in there, and it doesn't like it when it's super cold because the yeast gets sleepy. And then it's fresh ground, so it's like a stimulant and a depressant at the same time, and who knows what your starter's gonna do. So I just don't go there. I just stay consistent. Yeah.
When you're either gonna stick it in the fridge or you're set it, do you let it rise or do you just feed it and then stick it?
If I'm storing the starter for the week, I feed it and immediately I put it in the fridge. And it'll slowly rise in the fridge, but you can, they say, go as long as 3 weeks before feeding it if it's been in the fridge. Because after a week I pull it out and it still rises over the next couple hours and finishes eating. So it can go longer, but I like to feed it about every 7 days because I don't forget. Yeah. Oh, in the freezer? No. So the freezer's for storing, like if you get fruit flies, mold, or your husband pours it down the drain because he thinks it's part of the dish. It didn't happen to me, it happened to my friend in Virginia. And she's like, no. Yeah, it was this whole thing. She's like, that's my sourdough starter and it's down the drain. Ben was like, I'm so sorry, it was part of dirty dishes. Put your starter somewhere safer. Right? Not by the sink.
So when you pull off and you're pulling off from fat, you wait for it to rise and then.
Nope, I feed it and then immediately I put some in the baggie and throw it in the freezer. Yeah. So when it comes out of the freezer, it's at that ideally it's at that exact same moment in time, right? We've just paused. And so it comes out and it should rise a little bit and then it should go down and hopefully you have some bubbles, right? That would make it rise. You may not have any bubbles right away, but you pull it out. I let mine come up to room temperature from the freezer because I had fruit flies, right? It came to room temperature, I fed it, and then I was anxiously watching it every hour. I'd come in and be like, do I have any bubbles? So I wouldn't use discard for the freezer stuff just because the yeast is stronger when it's active, and I guess logically I would think it would have a better chance of bouncing back from the freezer than discard would. But I haven't frozen discard, so I don't know. Yeah.
So when you're measuring out your wheat berries to get ready to grind, if I want 250 grams of flour, is it 250 grams of wheat berry, or do I need a little bit more wheat berry?
So I measured into here on the scale. Remember, I was at 249.7 or something like that. And then it was 242 after I finished because some of my wheat berries are still in here.
Okay.
So it kind of stuck to the edge. So if you want to go like 255 or 260, right? And then if you come out with 252 because the rest is stuck in the bowl, then you just finish topping it off with the store-bought flour until you hit 300. Yeah.
Have you ever tried King Arthur, the gluten-free flour?
I haven't. So I haven't ever used any of the gluten-free stuff for making gluten-free bread. That's not in my wheelhouse. I know of people, I haven't talked to them, but I know of people who have successfully had a gluten-free starter and been consistently making gluten-free bread. However, that is not the natural state of bread. You can't grind wheat berries because wheat berries have gluten in them, right? So you have to buy store-bought flour for that, and I'm not sure what's in it. I mean, King Arthur's a great brand, but I don't know if they use rice. I don't know what they do to make it that way. So that's not my wheelhouse. You'd have to kind of do your own research on that. Yeah, it can be done. I know people. I know of people who have done it, but I just don't really know anything about it.
They usually add tapioca starch.
It's a tapioca.
And
Okay.
potato starch.
Potato starches and tapioca starch, so gluten free. Sabrina's like, okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
So I have a cast iron skillet with like a long handle that doesn't have a lid. Will that work with putting on like a metal lid that I have from a kitchen pan?
Is your cast iron skillet this big or is it bigger?
It's bigger.
I wouldn't use it
No.
because the dough is going to flatten out,
Okay.
and so you'll have more like a frisbee.
That's great.
So the flying saucer would be a little bit, hopefully it would be this thick, but it'd be wider, right? If you get a good rise, you know, with it. Anyway, yeah, I wouldn't. With this particular one, it can only go as wide as the pot, right?
And that's
It's
all
close.
I have to
Yeah. And so, and it doesn't come to the very top, but it's still, it's close. It's close. Anybody else? Yeah.
Is the consistency of the frisbee bread less desirable than the wall bread?
Why don't you tell me? I'm gonna cut into them. I have butter over here, and I'm also gonna cut into all the breads. So if you want some, this is only King Arthur, and then these other two are 50-50. Okay, so if you want to take a little bit from each, so you can taste test. You know, tell me what you think. Anyway, any other questions? Somebody else had their hand up. Yeah.
How long will the sourdough discard last if you want to use it? You know, you're thinking, oh, I've got some extra.
I want to say
And in the refrigerator?
almost forever.
Forever, okay.
That is not what the government would probably say. One website said 3 weeks, and I was like, it's been 4 years. And it hasn't gone bad yet. So, but I'm constantly pulling from it and adding more to it.
Okay.
And I stir it up every time. So like I said, you're almost giving it like a snack. Not really a feed, but you're pulling off starter that has just gone down that's still active. And you're adding it to stuff that's really cold and sleepy in the fridge. And it's like, oh, cool. And it perks it up a little bit and it makes it a little happy, and maybe there's a couple more numbs for it to eat on. So I haven't had it go bad.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, who wants some bread? Yes. You are so welcome. I'm gonna bring the bread over. I don't know, maybe I'll do it right here. There's butter over there, which I can get and bring over here too if y'all want some bread. Also, if you don't have a starter and you want starter, I have starter here and we have jars here. And so you can feed your own starter. Go ahead and feed it tonight and see how, to do it. And if you have questions, I'm here for you to ask. And Itzel has bags over here with cute little ribbons. You can decorate your jar. But a jar is free for you to take home with you with your starter in it. So that is this right here. And we have 2 scales. I'll add this over there. If you want to buy wheat berries, just come up here. I've got baggies and wheat berries, and I'll weigh them out for you too. Okay? I'm going to stop the camera.